the ThinkFWD Community Round Table. I'm Jordan Campbell. I'm a product designer at DS.
I am Alyssa Callahan. I am a design strategist at DS and also editor-in-chief of the ThinkFWD newsletter.
I'm Mikki Toledo. I'm a research strategist, and I work on the ThinkFWD newsletter alongside Alyssa.
I am Mishell Manrique. I'm an innovation strategist and a professional sleuth.
Awesome. So today's topic is about AI-generated art. Some of us have familiarity with it, with playing around with it. I know we did an event here a couple weeks ago or a week ago, where we had people come in and we did some generated stuff. I've played around with it before, but what's each of your experiences with it?
So for me, I'm super new to it also. I actually was introduced to it for the first time at that Discord. So it was really cool. You know, we all kind of went through it together, and it was super easy just to, you know, have some people to do it with, and didn't feel super challenging. It was really exciting. So, how about you guys?
My first experience was when Pete started to talk about it in our company Slack channels. And of course, the creation of the zeitgeist first kind of introduced me to the idea of AI-generated art. And then, of course, we attended the Discord event in ThinkFWD where we created it ourselves and saw how it worked and things that worked and didn't work to create a good product.
Yeah, so we actually had a few of the people in our team. I think it was JC and two others who were able to create the dall-e bot into our Slack, and we had it presented to us on a stand-up on a Monday, and everybody kind of went crazy the first day and used up all the credits. Yeah. And it was kind of the first time I was introduced to it, which seemed honestly, it seemed a little scary to try out because there's just so much writing that has to go into it, or at least at first glance that's what it looks like. And that's someone that for a really long time I didn't really think of myself as creative enough. Creative to talk, yes, but to draw something, to create something on I don't know, Photoshop, InDesign, it takes so long. It was definitely scary. But it wasn't until that one Discord happy hour that we just started messing around, and it gives you a little bit of a breather, knowing that you're putting in these words, you're telling them how to do it. But it's not on you to create this design. What's on you is to find the right way to describe it for the machine to catch on to what you're saying. It's like you become the inspiration for the machine.
So I agree with you about it being scary. I have to admit this. I downloaded the Midjourney server about a week before we did our Discord thing, and I was just terrified to put all my stuff out there in front of everybody, because what happens is you join a channel, and it's a newbies channel, so you expect everybody else is new, but still it doesn't really matter. You're a little bit like, oh no, anything I put in here, everyone's going to see. So I got nervous to do that when I was by myself, and you're kind of putting yourself out there. And it was really helpful to have us all kind of do it together for a little nudge into something that was new territory.
Yeah, and I think one of the first things that I noticed is when you're first getting started out, you're just dog portrait. You'll put just basic thing, and you're like,
Cocker spaniels.
Yeah, and you're like, this is not all what I wanted. Once you get the return, I mean, at least in Midjourney, it's the 4 things. I think dall-e bot does it that way too. Yeah, where it's 4 different things. Sometimes it's on point. Other times you what's going on, so you do a little research, or you hit up people like us here just to find out what you can actually do. But I remember a few years ago when it was first getting started, I watched this weird YouTube video. I'll have to find it at some point, but basically it's a 16 by 16 grid of AI art, and it's if you squint your eyes, that's basically what it generated was just if you did a landscape, it was literally 16 pixels of a mountain. And so as it progressed and dall-e bot became popular because it was only $15 for 150 credits, 150 renders. It's a no-brainer. Now everyone's into it. Or Midjourney, it's free. So it's just really cool how much the community has expanded, and in doing that, people have found strategies for like you were saying, the writing of it and how complicated and detailed you can get, and how much that plays a factor in it.
So what have we created so far? Maybe we should talk about that. What's an example of what we did? So something that we looked into when we all did it together was culture. So what's in pop culture right now? What are the things that we're really interested in, and how could we recreate that? So House of the Dragon was one of the things that we really used as a big theme for us.
Ragnarok. Yes. I think get into something that you already have kind of an image of because you're watching it on TV every Sunday. Definitely helps when creating that description. You have a little bit more of an idea as to, oh, it should have a fiery background, it should be red, the hair should be white. But also what piqued my interest while I was putting that font, I try to find a piece of the book where she's being described and tried using it in my description to see, is there a different way that she could have looked than the one that we're looking at her in the screen every day? And it's so interesting because you can do it with all of your books. I can't tell you how many books there are out there that I wish had been turned into movies or Rip. The Percy Jackson series that didn't do too well in the movies. I would love to put the description of him into the system and see like what does AI think Percy Jackson should look like?
No, I definitely think like that taking it from the book is actually super interesting. I think the lens that I was taking it from is like the motion graphic photography, cinematography lens. Like I saw people, I mean, you see it in the Midjourney Discord all the time where it's like 8K and like, high res and like a certain distortion, certain lens quality. So like that part was super interesting. So I think like for people that are getting started, like looking up those types of things and like learning what the different ratios, like 16:8 ratios are, and just maybe even just seeing how that comes out to learn what it's about is pretty cool.
I also think it's interesting how an AI would interpret concepts like the feeling of guilt or the feeling of sadness and how it kind of would create that in a visual image. So I thought that was a really interesting aspect of AI generated art.
And do you think it's like pulling from Google, like for those things? Like, what do you think, like with the emotion part?
I think it would have to be pulled from, I mean, when we think of sadness, we think of the color blue, the color gray. So there's already like a humanity aspect to what it's pulling from. So it's taking like human emotion and putting it through like an AI generated thing and creating art with it. So it's got to be pulling from like our own interpretation of what does sadness look like? What does grief look like? What does rage look like? And certain things already come to head. I mean, this has been something that's been going on since like the written word. Mm-hmm. You know, when you describe or want symbolism, it's always, oh, she's feeling like jealous, so the color is green. And I think that has deep roots into what art will always be.
I think it also opens it to history, you know?
Yes.
If we look at, especially the history of colors, if we look at the history of pink, pink has gone through this, like, it used to mimic blood, so men used to wear it, to then it became the like nice, sweet color the women wore. And then it was seen as, if you're wearing pink, you're too girly. So we see the women like stayed away from it, and now it's coming back, and there's the hot pink. And I think 2023 has been dubbed as the year of the hot pink with the recent fashion shows. What will the color pink look like in 2025 or 2030 or 2050? And how does AI use that to describe a mood? You know, like. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be used as something that's sweet and caring, like what we're seeing right now? Or is it going to be used as something for fear and pain?
Do you think that's what MGK does with his pink? I know he went pink, but like, is that like if you put that in an AI, what would it do? Like, how would you tailor MGK's like rock metal pink and get that pink out of that? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great question. Yeah. I mean, we are able to differentiate these feelings because we're able to set them apart, and we're like constantly living in we know that Machine Gun Kelly does like the really hot pink because he's trying to be out there. He's like drinking his partner's blood, and we know that if Selena Gomez puts on pink, she's going more for feminism and like the right for equality. We can tell that because we're constantly living in that universe, but I don't know if the AI can, and that, I think that's a discussion as to, will the AI be able to do so?
I think what's pretty cool about it is you could almost kind of see yourself in that scenario through AI. So like MGK coming out with the pink and like trying to be eccentric and unique, he's doing that outwardly as his own person, but in AI you can experiment with all of that kind of stuff and see yourself in all these different ways and not actually have to put it all out there. So it's almost like a precursor, like you could experiment before you put it out into the world, which is kind of cool with anything, your own personal expression, how you'd want to see, let's say you were writing your own book and you wanted to see what those characters would actually look like based on how you describe them. you could test it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually saw in the Midjourney thread, I don't know how to get to it, to be honest, but there's like a homepage where you can see like the top posts that got reactions and stuff. And someone legit made a comic book like out of Midjourney images. And like, I want to know like what they entered to like get, like literally it tells a story. It's only like 5 pages, but like it's pretty cool. Like, so just to imagine where that's going, that's pretty interesting. And how many variations I'm sure they tried, to your point, and like just where you could experiment with it before, you know, publishing it or telling a regular, like, traditional artist, hey, this is what I'm envisioning. Like, can you run with this?
And it's interesting that you mentioned that you were less impressed by the actual art of the comic and more impressed by, like, what did they put in to get this? So it's the words that are more impressive than the actual output that the AI gives you.
Yeah, because, I mean, with any of those, it's like, okay, you hit enter, right? Like, for me, it's like the creative part, like you were talking about, is how do you get that language in? And it is intimidating because at first you're like, again, I get a crappy portrait of like a dog that's straightforward, not looking like anything like either of my dogs. So then, but I remember when we were experimenting, it's like you have to just like pull on random objects, pull on random things to like get it to look cool or realistic or like turn them. So it's definitely like I'm more intrigued with the creativity of that. I mean, even for me, like, did you all hear about like that art competition where the person got first? So like, are you more impressed with how it came out, or like what got them there?
Well, if you think about it, it really is creative direction, right?
Yeah.
So in creative direction, you have to find the perfect ways to describe things and the perfect words to use, and you have to be concise and you have to be clear. It's the same thing. It's creative direction to a piece of art. So even though it's digital and it's not, you know, maybe a traditional way you'd see it, but it's all the same processes still go into it. You have to clearly define what you want to see and figure out the best way to communicate that.
I think that's, oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say, it's interesting too, like hearing that, because you definitely, with creative direction, it's like you have to see what somebody comes back to you with, like seeing what they present you with. And, you know, we get 4 options with all these AI bots. So it's like a little variation of that, a little different direction of that, or you go back to the drawing board, kind of like what we do with our jobs, and we like revisit it from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think going back to the creative direction part is when we look at movies, these actors get a script and then they turn it into something. That's exactly how I see AI, you know, Midjourney. Like, I see myself as a writer, and then AI is just creating the scene, is creating that final piece. And if we look at how it's juxtaposed into like the real world, writers get the prize as well as the actor. Independent recognition. I think it's starting to create a conversation around creative writing, as well as having the chance to win contests such as those because you knew the right creative direction without having to judge on the execution of it, which often happens when we look at, I don't know, shows such as the Emmys. Sometimes we won't necessarily agree with the actor that played it, but we agree with the writing behind it. So I don't think it was fair for that person to win that competition, because he didn't enter a competition where others had the same type of privilege as he did, but he or she very much deserved to win because they were creative in their own way. It's just, where do we split it?
Right. Another point, just kind of going back to the language, is that I'm wondering if people who are bilingual, trilingual, have different advantages when it comes to inputting what they're telling the AI. There's words that exist in German that do not exist, or that embody a feeling that do not exist in English. So I think that would make you stand out if you were going to enter something. You know, how many languages do you know? How many like nuances can you describe?
So have you tried entering it in Spanish?
I have not.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah,
like maybe you can,
sick.
or doing Spanglish on it and seeing if it can pick up on a mix of it.
It's such an interesting topic too, and we've talked about this before in the past, is representation, right? So how does it decide who it's representing? So if you just put man in there, you just put woman in there, what does that mean? Like, what is going into that to justify what the image is that spits back out? I'm curious to know, like, how we're going to unpack what goes on behind the scenes and what that means for representation or what the world becomes in terms of like how we categorize things or qualify things.
And there's also, even if we're looking into like how different groups speak, there's different idioms, there's different, take someone from the north and tell them to describe something as compared to someone from the south. How could that vary, and would it produce the same image? Would be super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Or even just like food. Like if you, in a piece of art, talk about like chorizo versus like just hot dog, like will it spit something out? Will it, like that's different, or will it be kind of similar?
Yeah.
No idea.
And
Gotta
does it
try
have
that.
to create environments to qualify it? Like, would you have to put the chorizo on a table? I don't know.
Like, what would that distinguish from another
what would do that?
bright red sausage thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
So for each of you, what does the future look like with AI generated art? And you can take this in any direction, whether it's like the competition route or just the industry in general, how it maybe legally gets affected, anything like that.
So I'll throw it out here. I think that it'd be interesting to incorporate motion capture. When I go like this or like this, like what would the AI interpret that as? Is that like grimacing? Is that sad? Is that frowning? And I think that would be an interesting way to have a physiological, I think is the word I'm looking for, incorporation into AI art, as well as people who may not be able to, write the same way other people can. I think that they could express themselves physically than they can with words.
I think you could also layer words into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about how people are starting to do storytelling with comics and things like that. We also saw another program called Open.ai that is another AI platform that helps you write. Yeah. So if there were a merger between, AI generated art and AI writing, you could essentially create a whole story with, all the imagery and all of the writing all in one thing, pop in a few things, and boom, you have
there's
you have
video
a book
now.
or a story.
There's
Yes.
like little samples of AI generated video. So future-wise, imagine if you're able to combine all three. You just put a type of font in it, and then you have your next TV show, your next movie. I think it's both exciting and scary. Exciting because it opens so many new paths to creativity. Scary because what about the people that are already in those spots creating those things? Like, what is their livelihood gonna look like in a couple of years? Like, how are they gonna have to completely pivot to something else?
I think that we could look on this in the, historically look at from like oil paintings to digital art. I think that maybe AI generated artwork will be more accessible and inexpensive than something that was digitally created by a human versus something that was painted physically by a human being. And I think that'll just give different mediums with different accessibility to all of them.
I think for me, the main thing is like the cross between the person, like the artist who's originally creating it. So like, I'm the type of person who, I'm not the best at fine art by any means. I remember in my painting class, I would like, I forget what it was called, but there was a way to project it on the wall and then like kind of trace over it. And that's how like a lot of the old architecture was like drawn out and painted on using mirrors. My art teacher would hate me right now for not remembering. But I think there's a way to do that too with AI generated art where it's like you get the concept down, you get the basics of what you want in there, and then the artist can, paint over it or take that as inspiration for their actual doing an actual painting out of that.
So here's something that reminds me of prototyping, right? What if AI generation is the next phase of like product prototyping?
They do a little bit of that, which is pretty crazy. I found a few things where like you can sketch out like a box and put an X in between it, and it'll make that an image. So like for UX design, there's some capabilities there. I'm excited for that, just to get ideas out there faster. It's not there yet by any means, but it'll be helpful, I think, in like a couple years. And on the other product side of it too, I know that like going back to your motion capture part, it's like depending on how they train the model. So like you have, these people just diagramming like smile, happy, like all the meta text that you're putting in there, that defines what it is. And, all those captchas that you're doing, whether or not they're already predetermined or not. It's like once you start feeding that into the machine learning algorithm, it'll start to understand, okay, like she's slightly smiling. Her happiness is like, 65% of what a completely happy person is. Right. We were using that on a product where in stores it like captures like this person sees a new product, they walk up to it and they're like that, like you can tell if they're upset in the store or happy and gauge like happiness from that. But I just wonder like how is that's going to play back to your point of like cinema and creation.
I keep on thinking also of the images. These are so well known, even if you haven't been to therapy as a kid. But like the therapist will pull up an image and it looks like either an elephant or your parents being killed. You've
Rorschach.
The Rorschach.
Yeah, that. I wonder if you could.
Were those your answers?
Yeah, very different.
No, they were darker. I did get an elephant tattooed eventually. Anyways, I wonder if we can feed those into AI during therapy sessions with kids, but have them describe what they're seeing, and see what comes out.
Whoa.
That's pretty
like
cool.
during the sessions, and be like, okay, this is how the machine is seeing it. Do you agree with it? And taking just a little bit of a step forward. I think it's a great way, and if we go down that path, to look deeper into our unconscious, especially when we're writing. And I'm not sure if any of you journal, but I journal unconsciously. So like, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I try not to think about what it is that I'm writing, and I just start writing. And I usually don't read it until months later. And it's a completely different person than the one I tend to show on a day-to-day. I wonder if that's something that we can use as a way to put out our thoughts and emotions and understand what's going on internally, and use AI as a tool to draw up our mind, like our silent mind.
So like, do you imagine it like you take one of your journal entries, for instance, and plug in all the things that were said? Like, how do you imagine that?
What
Like,
if I just plug in like a little paragraph or a couple of sentences of something that happened or how I felt or what, and see what comes out of that?
So that made me think of a lot of things. The first one is when you were talking about having little kids explain what their thoughts are, and it basically draws it out and explains it in more detail. That reminded me of like, this is so silly and random, but it reminded me of the process of the police department when there's when they have a potential suspect and they have to describe what they looked like, and you have the typical artist that draws the eyes and the nose and the mouth. Imagine you can just put that directly into Midjourney, and then there's your suspect. Like, to your point, maybe a job that someone no longer has because of it, but
Goodbye, Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
yeah. But then the other thing is, what you're talking about is like a snapshot in time of your own thoughts, feelings, emotions. And I feel like that's what art really is, right? It's a snapshot in time. And I think that AI-generated art is no different than any other art throughout history that really exemplifies, what humanity is experiencing at the time, what's culturally relevant. I feel like there will be a future where we look back on all of the art that we generated now and we say, oh yeah, that's really reminiscent of, 2022, 2023. Same way we look back on Renaissance art and Gothic art and all of that. It's going to be a snapshot in history that goes down in the chronicles. So I'm really interested to see like what our snapshot, when you take the 30,000-foot view out, is going to really look like.
Yeah, we were talking about this in that happy hour on Discord. A lot of what I've been seeing on the channels for the Midjourney Discord, it's very dark. It's very like, get me the hell out of here. I am not having a good time. It's a lot about small creature and dark forest or warpath, and there's a lot of warrior request. People that are alone, I don't really see bright, fun, happy in your face colors. It's more of I've been stuck inside for the last 2 years. Someone get me a therapist or help me out, make me smell the roses outside.
And I wonder if different demographics will see it differently. Like if we look back to, if AI art existed in 2016, which groups would have been happy during that time? Which groups could have been sad at that time? Which ones felt like they weren't in power at that time? And it could kind of, let us see visually in an art form how many different interpretations of a time period were at that time. So
I think it'd be interesting too. I don't know if it's possible, but like with the millions probably of requests now to see what the most common terms were used in dall-e and Midjourney, just to see like what are people going through different months and like different time periods, maybe even location, like you're saying. I think something cool like the zeitgeist stuff that we did really captures that well with like what's going on that day, and just the style of it is definitely unique to zeitgeist, but just to see like what's popular during that time. I do wonder, to your point, like from people just around the world, like who may not even know about this yet, like when it becomes more popular, more affordable, more accessible, like what else will be generated?
It can be used for trend analysis too.
Exactly.
If there was a simple way to just, I hate this because we have all of our data outside, and I hate that I'm suggesting this, but if there's a way to track by age, by like place or where you live, not necessarily down to the zip code, but maybe region wise, what do you identify as in some type of belief? I think if we're able to constantly track this and use the system to alert industries that like we're seeing an uptick in, you know, the color red that's being mentioned. Is this something that we can use to create a trend for the next year? You know, like how everybody picks the color of the year and the things that people are looking forward to, then all of the bags come out red. Is this a way to see, we see a certain age group, say the 18 to 25 age group, that are coming out with very dark, very soul-crushing type of artwork where they look like they're trapped, you know? Are there programs, is this data, can it be used by governments to say, like, are there programs we can implement so society can have a place to go and get mental help and get access to help with jobs or help with food, just by, like, tracking these to understand, like, what's going on internally?
The possibilities for that are crazy. Like, it's a statistician's dream, because eventually, once this is all cataloged, you're going to start being able to create whatever report you want. So this is old school, but I think about like the old days of like Nielsen reporting, where people had to like write down what I watched on TV and blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff is now transferred into visual depictions of it all. So if we're uploading House of the Dragon, then they're going to see all these other people uploading it, and they're going to know, okay, that was the viewership of that show during this time. And they're going to be able to quantify what was previously very qualitative data, or maybe, you know, like social listening, or like very, I don't know, less identifiable information can be all bucketed in without having to, I guess bother is not the right word, but like try to get that information from people in some other kind of way.
And I think that we talked about this, that there was a viral tweet going around that Avatar, the 2012 David Cameron movie, had no cultural footprint because they based it off of how many fanfics were written about it. Mm-hmm. Not many fanfics were written about it, therefore not a lot of people desire to write their own story based off this story. So going back to House of Dragon, how many AI images are being generated based on House of Dragon versus other shows that are on that time? Like, which one has the biggest cultural footprint that people want to create their own art based on that art?
So that's going to be a really good test, because when Avatar comes out, the next one, we'll see if
we'll see how much of their cultural footprint is.
They have better funding this time, so hopefully.
They had more than they had before?
Yeah.
I thought those blue people were real.
Completely not there, but kind of there. I wonder if it's a way that we could track future serial killers, depending on the type of artwork that they put in.
That's a whole nother discussion.
Like, those intrusive thoughts that they might not be able to tell others become the ideas they create on AI.
Maybe we'll talk about that one next time.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's all for today. Make sure to check out our Discord, hit us up on ThinkFWD.co, and we'll see you on the next one.